See, what you got to realize when you first hear this information and you hear all of these different star stories, you got to realize that this is a part of what's called the greatest story that's never been told, even though you've heard this story over and over again in various different places. You may have heard tidbits of this story in religion. You may have heard tidbits of this story in school. You may have heard tidbits of this story in the streets or watching television or in the movies. However, you've never been told the story at the same time because most people that tell this story tend to isolate the version of their story from other versions of the story. So, for instance, when you read about the story of, say, for instance, the story of Krishna, you may read about the story of Krishna, and then you may turn around and read about the story of Jesus, and you think you're reading a different story. However, you're not. Because according to some texts, when you get into studying Jesus, Jesus had over 13 missing years, or years that were specifically deleted from his story in the Bible. So his story in the Bible actually only covers a year of his work. 1 year. But then if you get into researching the Aquarian Gospel of Levi and other different texts out there, you'll find out that Jesus had, it's 18 missing years. You'll find out that Jesus had 18 missing years of information in his story. And in these 18 missing years, you'll find out that Jesus traveled to India. Jesus traveled to Tibet. Jesus came over to America. Jesus was doing a lot of traveling, and they don't tell you that aspect. So this is why I say that all the stories that you hear about, you've only heard about them in isolated incidents, and then when you hear about it from another angle, you think you're reading a different story when it's the same story. And this is very key when it comes to understanding the type of information that I bring here on YouTube and other formats and other modalities that I choose to bring it up under, is that I try to link the stories together. And because I know if I'm reading about Zeus, there's an aspect of Zeus that carries over into the story of Jesus. See, and I know these things. So when you find someone like me, I'm trying to connect all of the dots and bring all of the stories together so that it can become the greatest story ever told again, not some story told from this perspective and this isolated incident, trying to bring all of the stories together. And the Starseed Renaissance movement is all about really showing you, not just telling you, but showing you the greatest story never told. And we're doing this in a way to where we're going to show you on television. Since this channel has been out, you didn't hear people talking about the third eye on television. Now, I was just watching actually sports now. This ain't the conspiracy channel or nothing like that. And this guy slapped this guy right here in the head. This basketball player, I think it was the Mavericks game. I can't remember which game it was. But one of the basketball players slapped the guy right here in the head. And the commentators laughing like, oh, he hit him in his third eye. Not his third eye. Not the third eye. They up here talking about the third eye like you ain't hear people talking about the third eye like even 4 years ago. And especially not on Sports Center. So what does that tell you? This is showing you the Starseed movement. This is what I said I was going to do. I'm going to show you the Starseed movement. I know you're like, well, you ain't the only one behind it, man. There's other people behind that shit, man. Why are you trying to get all the light and all the fame for yourself? I never said I was the only one behind it. I was taught this information myself. So, and it was passed on to me. And I've told you guys that on many videos. So I'm not trying to act like or even perpetrate a fraud to say I'm the only one. I'm a part. This is why I say support our channel. There's many people affiliated with what I do. You know, I just so happen to be the face that brings the information, the more pertinent information, and I put it out into the world. But then you'll watch how people take bits and pieces. They're supposed to do that. I don't copy this information. I don't own this information. This information was passed along from the ancients, from mouth to ear. You had to earn this information. The reason why I'm giving it out freely right now is because this is what was written and supposed to happen. There was going to be a time where this information was given out to the masses so that the masses could choose. And this takes us into the subject of this particular video, which I want to talk about Ophiuchus. Because the story of Ophiuchus goes into understanding conspiracies. See, conspiracies have been going on since the beginning of time. The story of Jesus, when you read about Jesus, Jesus was a part of a conspiracy. the story about Enki and Enlil, and the stories of Sumeria and the Anunnaki. These are all conspiracies. A conspiracy is when two or more people know a certain truth and they withhold it purposefully from another group of people, but then they come around that group of people and act in a different light. These are conspirators. Agents and people that work for the government are master conspirators. Master conspirators. Because they know certain information and they come around and target certain people, and they know one thing about the person that they're targeting, but they don't act like they don't know anything about that. But then they're really here to get information about that particular thing, but then they come up under another pretext and they come up under a totally different guise. That's called a conspiracy. A conspiracy is like a particular woman saying, yo, I'm your girlfriend, and I'm going to be here for you and do this for you and that for you, but really she's a psyop agent. And this particular woman is working for some other group, or she may not even be. See, that's the thing about conspirators, is a lot of times they're not even totally informed on what they're doing, the information they're getting. They're just meant to put you into a certain state and environment, and then other third parties are working with the conspirator to get more information out of you. So your girlfriend, say for instance, could be an agent and be used as a pawn to get you to be in certain situations, in certain places at certain times, so that they can continue the conspiracy. Because they need you to be in this place at this time. They need someone there to conspire to have you there. Now, conspiracies don't necessarily have to be negative. A person can conspire to do something positive in the world, but they may still have to conspire to do it. Because when you understand the occult, this is going into the 8th house. When you understand the 8th house is about secrets. And the only way you're going to change the world is through a sacred and secretive means and method. The Egyptians were secretive. Even though they were master healers and they did a lot of good things for the planet, they still were very secretive in how they moved. They still moved like agents too. So I'm not knocking the nature of conspiracy. I'm just explaining to you how this came about. And this whole conspiracy thing definitely has a lot to do with the beings of Ophiuchus. These beings that are from the constellation of Ophiuchus have been here, and they started actually coming here before the Anunnaki even came here. So before the Anunnaki, you read about those stories, you had beings that were serpent-looking beings. Ophiuchus is a galaxy that's a part of the Serpent's constellation, which means that majority of these beings look similar to snakes. They look very similar to snakes. What you got to remember is that the life that exists on this planet, the majority of it, the basis of it, comes from different experiments and different gene pools and different things of that nature that were indigenous to other planets. This is a collective. This is kind of like a place where a lot of different, kind of like a melting pot almost, where a lot of different beings from different places partook in experiments to bring life to this particular planet. So it's no different with the snakes. These beings and snake type of entities go all the way back to the constellation of Ophiuchus. However, they started coming here because one of their stars died out, and this star was actually exploded back in 1604. And this is when another set and group of these beings starts to come to this planet around the 1600s. And this is because their stars, certain stars, were dying out within the galaxy in the constellation of Ophiuchus, so they had to start coming here to find new homes. And they started doing this before the Anunnaki. So when the Anunnaki came to this planet, they came and followed a being named Marduk, was one of the chief beings that came to this planet, and he was a part of the army of Enki. Marduk. And Marduk comes up in this story because Marduk is the same person as Zehuti or Tahuti, and the same person as Melchizedek. These are all same stories. When you read about Marduk and you read about Melchizedek and you read about Tahuti, you read about the same entity, just different cultures telling the same story or different aspects of the same story. So remember, I told you, in order to understand the greatest story never told, you have to be able to understand isolated stories and bring them together. So the story of Marduk shows up with Ophiuchus. A lot of people didn't know that he crossed paths with Ophiuchus, or his name is Asclepius. There's another name that they call him. I'm not good at pronouncing, I may be mispronouncing it, but it's spelled Aesculapius. As you can see, I got flashcards. thanks to a friend of mine, I was able to get some flashcards, and this is a particular flashcard. This is Ophiuchus right here. This is Ophiuchus right here, the serpent bearer. Hope you guys can see it. And this is how the constellation looks. So Ophiuchus is the serpent bearer and is a healer. And when Ophiuchus came here, he saw the problems of the planet, and he didn't like the control that other beings were putting on beings that were indigenous to this planet. So he had his own group. That's how you got to look at it. He had his own group, his own way of doing things, and he was teaching people that follow his group to heal themselves and to become healers, or what we call light workers right now. Ophiuchus made up all of this. So when you hear me talk about light workers and you wonder why, see, I'm an initiate to the school of Ophiuchus, which means that those people that take the Hippocratic Oath to be healers, we are initiates in the school of Ophiuchus, because we decided that we were going to better the planet through healing modalities. Now, we didn't say we had to go and tell everyone exactly how we were going to do it and give out all of the beams and give out all the information. I didn't say all of that. However, we are responsible for giving out certain key points and certain information. And this is what Ophiuchus decided to do, because he looked at it like, if you teach human beings or beings of this planet everything that there is to know, then that would make them responsible and accountable, which would kind of eliminate our need to kind of hold different individuals, different beings' hands and create religions and schools and the whole control system that's set up on this planet. Ophiuchus was kind of like trying to shut that down. And Marduk didn't like that, because Marduk and the Anunnaki, they came from a place of like control. It was like their way or the highway. So they believed in trickery, manipulation, whatever they had to do to control humans, and they believed that they shouldn't teach, not just humans, because it's beings at this point, because this started happening before humans were even created. So at this time, they believed that they shouldn't teach beings that was indigenous to this planet, whether they came from the inner caverns of the earth, because I told you in my last video some beings were already here before the Anunnaki came, and they were living in caverns and things of that nature. So they believed that they shouldn't tell these particular beings any information, any advanced information that would free them and teach them that they didn't have to die and they had the cure for death. So they was walking around with the cure for death, the Anunnaki and them. They didn't teach the slaves that they created about this cure for death, though. Made them think that they had to at some point die. And that's the greatest lie that is true, because we believe it and we create our own reality. However, that's the greatest lie. So Ophiuchus was going around, or Sleepius was going around teaching the opposite. He was teaching about the Kundalini of the planet. This is why he's called the serpent bearer. Whereas Marduk, remember, Marduk made war with Tiamat. Tiamat is the serpent. And Marduk decided to make war with the serpent and to subdue the serpent against his own will, whereas Ophiuchus was so cold that he took control of the serpent without even the serpent's knowledge. The serpent didn't even have knowledge that it was being bared or being controlled. This is why he's called the serpent bearer. It's almost like if you took a snake on as a pet, and you're one of those people that took the snake on, and you can work with snakes, and you let the snake hang around your neck, and you feed the snake right out your hand, and you just got total control over it, because your mind is, you learn how to work with your mind, and you put a spell on the snake with your mind. You put the snake into a trance with your mind. And then this is what Ophiuchus did. Ophiuchus was able to put spells on its enemies with his mind, to where these beings, even though they look like snakes and they may look gruesome and they may look like they can kill some shit, they wouldn't do anything to you, because they had more power than that. They knew how to manipulate things through the mental modalities. Whereas Marduk and those beings, they had to put beings in prison, and they had camps and like kind of like plantations, if you will. That's what the Garden of Eden was. The Garden of Eden was a plantation, and the beings of the Anunnaki were the beings, when they say God was walking through the garden and saw Eve doing this, that was the Anunnaki walking through the garden. That was the slave master at the time. Ophiuchus didn't run a slave camp. Ophiuchus made you accountable for everything. Now, that didn't mean that everybody survived the school of Ophiuchus. That didn't mean that they didn't still have people that died. However, it were more immortals and more people that knew about the cure for death and mastered life up under the school of Ophiuchus than it was up under these different religious schools. What you got to remember is that when I talk about Marduk, you got to remember Marduk or Murdoch. This is the god of religion. This is a part of the school of Melchizedek. See, all the prophets, they had to go to this school called the school of Melchizedek. And they said in the Bible that Melchizedek had no end of days. This means that Melchizedek wasn't immortal, just like Ophiuchus wasn't immortal, or Asclepius. However, Melchizedek was a different type of immortal, where he believed that to put humans through schools and to give them just enough information to make them good workers, whereas Ophiuchus had a whole other government, a whole other way of running things. So the whole religion, you can almost look at Melchizedek as the god of religion, or as the deity that kind of put human beings up under this spell that I talk about, the spell of Kingu, or the spell of Leviathan, that the master teacher, our fellow Imam Isa, talked about. Talked about this spell that we are up under. Human beings are up under this spell of Leviathan. It's called the spell of sleep. And this is what we are up under, whereas Ophiuchus was waking people up, giving them the knowledge. And that made him the bad guy. And eventually his class tried to come to this planet many times. And it's funny because you hear about all of these other different beings from Pleiades and Sirius, and their constellations are way out. However, you hear very little about Ophiuchus. You hear very little about this particular galaxy, even though it's a galaxy that its star sits along the path of our ecliptic, which means that the sun moves across the stars of Ophiuchus every day. We channel energy from Ophiuchus every day. However, this information is unknown to us, and this is how Ophiuchus got the name of being the unknown constellation, or the unknown galaxy, because no one seemed to know about it, but at the same time, everyone did know about it. It was more like a conspiracy. This is why we say that in order to understand conspiracies, you got to understand the constellation of Ophiuchus. And even in this modern day time, it's still a conspiracy. It's still a conspiracy. You see the starseed movement going on right now, and you see it being televised and things of that nature. However, it took a lot to get it to this point, and it's still a conspiracy to suppress this information. You have astrologers and different beings like that know that Ophiuchus exists, but they choose not to teach their students about Ophiuchus. Even though you can go get any book on the galaxies, just like I got this from a store, and they got the constellation of Ophiuchus right here. And it says Ophiuchus is the only constellation in the ecliptic, which is the path of the sun, not counted as a constituent of the zodiac. They telling you this right in this daggone deck of cards. So it's not like I'm making this stuff up. The constellation is out there. It's just that people don't want to know the truth, or people don't want to teach the truth. They don't want to teach their students this stuff. So Ophiuchus goes into like teaching his students astrology. When you studied at school, he taught his students herbology. His whole thing was to make the student accountable and teach the student every potential threat that the student may come up under. He gave you a solution or some type of form of a healing modality to be immune to that threat of death. And this is how he taught the cure of death. He taught the cure of death by making you knowledgeable of all the different threats that you may come up under in this society, whereas in this society we don't teach our children enough about the negative threats that they may come up under, as well as the positive threats that they may come up under, because we don't know enough about them ourselves. We don't know enough about the way the world works to even understand certain threats, because you got to understand conspiracies on a mass level to even be able to teach people the type of information that Ophiuchus was teaching people. So this is why you never heard of this constellation. This constellation resonates with the color white. They come from the white ethers, these beings of Ophiuchus, which means that they come from what you call really the seventh heaven. These beings are high up beings, because you got to remember, even though you got the galaxy of Ophiuchus, that's a galaxy that sits within a constellation called Serpens. And Serpens goes way out into the cosmos. So this is going out into the white ethers, and these are what you would call angels and beings of high light. The white light is supposed to be the purest light, correct? And these are the beings that are composed of the white light. So even though they may look like snakes and most people were scared of them, these were the least. These beings would probably be the least expected beings to harm you or to hurt you. You would get harmed by a group of reptilians or even a group of humanoid-looking beings before you would get harmed by the Ophiuchans. They were simply here to teach you. They have 55 visible stars in their star constellation. And every 20 years, they try to make themselves known to humanity. Every 20 years. So in 2000, the last time they started a campaign to make themselves known to humanity was in 2005. So obviously I was one of the individuals, and myself and others, that was chosen, because that's when I really was deemed to be a teacher. Really was actually in 2006. This is when I was really given the juice. Really between the years of 2005 and 2006 is when I was crowned. You could say I almost was crowned king. Not king in the sense of I'm over you and looking down on you, but king in the sense of now I'm your servant. I'm here to teach you. I'm your public servant here to teach you and guide you into the ways of the starseed story. This is what I was born to do. And this happened around that time. The last time that they sent the communication to make themselves known to human beings on this planet. They will send another communication in 2025. So obviously whatever comes of this information, by the time 2025 gets here, the planet will shift to the next level of Ophiuchus. So right now, for instance, I may just be on YouTube guiding you, but by the time 2025 comes, hopefully we'll have a whole school dedicated to Ophiuchus. Somewhere probably underground, because they probably are going to try to suppress the information again, because they always do. But this time we want to at least leave remnants of this information available so that when people come behind us, they can continue on where we left off at, and they don't have to start from the beginning. So Ophiuchus, and understand Ophiuchus is to really understand astrology, to understand the 8th house, to understand the Kundalini energy, to understand what it is to work with the serpent, and to work with that energy, to use that energy to change the world. You have enough energy, enough chi located in your body to change the world. And this is what understanding Ophiuchus is all about. You don't have to manipulate people to change them. You don't have to put a gun to their head to change them. You have enough energy and chi to where you could put positive spells on the world to change the world. And it's going to take a positive spell, because the world is in such a condition that you can't just give it to people plain. You can't give it to people straight with no chaser. You see, you got to put a little bit, you got to chase that. You see, because if you give it to them straight with no chaser, they'll get the truth and it'll blow their mind. They'll be like a person that just drunk some whiskey straight, and they mind blown, and it's too much for them, and they go crazy. So you got to kind of water it down and give it to them gradually. And this is what you learn in the healing modalities. This is what Ophiuchus kind of came to teach and kind of came to bring. So all this information that I talk about, all of it can really be scienced up with this one particular constellation. All of it. Everything I teach about the starseed story, why I'm doing it, it all goes back to Ophiuchus. This constellation. This is why I say that the things that happen in the cosmos end up taking place here, because you're reading about this story about Ophiuchus and him being suppressed by Marduk and everything I just told you. You may be reading about that, and that may have happened 50, 60, 100,000 years ago. However, I went through some of the same stuff that Ophiuchus went through. Even to the point where I was suppressed by people with the name Marduk, with that actual name. And here I am, when I first started teaching, I didn't even know about Ophiuchus, and here I am, my whole channel is dedicated to 13th sign, which is Ophiuchus, which is really, Ophiuchus is actually really the 8th sign, but that's a whole other story. I'm sorry, the 9th sign. It's really the 9th sign, but that's another story I won't go into here. But it's the 9th or the 13th, depending on how you want to look at it, depending on which part of the circle you start at. Let's say it like that. So here I am, representing the 9th or the 13th sign, and teaching it, and being and striving to be that immortal, and striving to teach people to be immortals, and striving to come up with, even if it's just to introduce this into a culture, or to introduce this to a group of people to where they pass this on to their children. That's really my true goal in bringing this information to you. So I hope that helped in understanding some of the information about Ophiuchus and some of the story about Ophiuchus and why Ophiuchus is even here. Like I said, it's very researchable. It's in all of the astrological books. We include Ophiuchus in our natal chart readings. We have information about Ophiuchus on our site. We have articles about Ophiuchus, so this is what we specialize in. So if you want to know more information, I suggest you check that out. I'm going to go ahead and shut down. I thank you guys for listening. I thank you guys for watching. And until we meet again, I'm going to leave you all. And peace out.